We've gone live. Okay, so thanks everyone who's joined us again for the second week. It's good to see you back, and thanks everyone who's joining us for the first time too. So last week's session I think went quite well. I think we had quite a lively discussion. So I want to say a couple of more thanks though before we get going. The first is to Martin, who organizes this thing and somehow manages to make it work in some fashion. and secondly, thanks to today's presenters, who are going to be Steve and Spencer. It's been a kind of a busy week for things going on in the community. There's been a lot of posts about things that have changed and so on and so forth. So we've got quite a few topics to cover. One of the good things about Google is that they keep doing lots of stuff, but one of the bad things about Google is they keep doing lots of stuff. So it means that the stuff that they used to do doesn't often work after a while, and they need to do it a different way. So that keeps us busy because we keep having to change how we do things. So that's one of the purposes of the community, is so we can help each other deal with the ongoing changes that we have to look after all the time. So I'm going to hand over to Martin now. He's going to take us through a couple of things we'll be covering on this call.
Thanks, Bruce. I've got a tagline for the show. I thought I'll try out. So the show where script happens. No, I'll keep working on that.
Yeah, you should. Yeah. Do a bit more.
So as Bruce said, it's been quite busy on the community pages for various communities for AppScript, with different announcements and discussions around things. So one of the things that relates to the show we did last month is around the fact that project keys have been deprecated. So obviously, if you're using libraries or doing OAuth, then a part of that flow is having was to have a project key declared, which you then have a user callback on. We all kind of woke up and suddenly project keys were deprecated, and there wasn't really much notice about that. Since then, Eric Kalida from Google has posted on the Google AppScript community some clarification going on with project keys and moving to script IDs. The good news seems to be that in fact, he says nothing will break, so things should keep on working. So even though it's deprecated, the project keys still work. So if you want to find out more about that, I've just put a link to that on the Google Plus event page, and we'll share that in the event notes as well. So some other couple of things as well. New things that we won't have time to talk about today, but hopefully someone from the community can actually, if you've got an example, is that there was a recent announcement with add-ons for Android. So I know a couple of people have already tested this, and so they've been able to deploy add-ons for the Android platform for Sheets. So if you've got an example of this that you'd like to show in our next show, drop us a line and we'll leave contact details on the event page for that as well. There's also been a lot of discussion around Google Drive web hosting, so which is very topical. We obviously knew the fact that Google Drive web hosting was noted as being deprecated for almost a year now. So the service is coming to the end of this month. So that really leads on nicely, and fingers crossed that Spencer has managed to get his system back up and running to some of the alternative places that you can host things like images for your add-ons and scripts. So over to you, Spencer.
All right. So we know that on August 31st, Drive hosting is going to disappear. So which means if you're hosting images, JavaScript libraries, anything like that, they're going to quit working inside your add-ons and your scripts on the 31st. There's a few alternate and really good choices that you can use to host, and I'll be going over one today. A big one that they just pushed, if you watch Google I/O, is Firebase became part of the Google family last year, and they made a big push at Google I/O, and what part of this was the introduction of Firebase hosting, which is a really good free service for low use, and it scales up very well if you need to move into more commercial-sized applications. So today we're going to take a look at using Firebase hosting to host assets for your AppScript projects. So I'm going to move over to my desktop here. And we'll start here with Firebase. Can be found. It's at firebase.google.com. And everything you need to get set up, the only thing you need is a Google account to get going, which if you're doing some app scripts, you're already there. So the first thing to do to get started is there's a little bit of tooling that you need to get going. The first one is Firebase uses Node.js to run its command line tool. This allows you to be able to do this. So Node.js will run on Linux, it'll run on Windows, it runs on Mac OS. If you're on a Chromebook, the tool doesn't work natively, but there's online sites that you can use, such as like Cloud9, which is c9.io. This is actually it's an integrated it's a website that has an IDE built into it, and you'll be able to do, if you're on a Chromebook, you'll be able to fulfill all these steps and get these tooling going on there. It's a good site if you haven't seen it yet. So the first thing you need to do is install Node.js. And from there, you install the Firebase command line tool, and it's simply by running this command right here. And this command comes off of the Firebase documentation of how to install the tool. And once your tool is installed, you're going to go back. You're going to go to firebase.google.io and get a project. So let's do that. So we're going to come to Firebase. I'm already logged into this site using my Google account. So I'm going to go to the console. And I'm going to click Create New Project. And we'll call this Totally Unscripted Live. We'll create that project. So this project is actually a developer's console project. It is the Firebase console, the Cloud console, and the Dev console are pretty much, there are three separate tools, but they're actually kind of one with different interfaces that deal with different tools. So now we have a project already set up in Firebase. And so what we need to do now is we go back. So what we're going to do is the next step is to create a project folder on your local development. So on my local machine, for example, I can come to my terminal and I can make a directory called my project. I can go into that. And from here, it's just an empty folder. There's nothing in here. So what you want to do is kind of working off the convention of the Firebase tools. You would make a public folder. And this public folder is for storing any assets that you would consider public assets, things that you would that you want anyone to be able to reach. And for this demonstration, I got a couple images that we're going to host, and then we're going to link to in our AppScript project. So I know I have on my desktop, I have some cat pictures. So
You weren't kidding.
no, I'm not kidding. I actually got some cat pictures. So here I got some cat pictures that I have them now copied into my public folder. So now I have cat pictures sitting in my public folder. So now I can use the Firebase tool. I'm now in my project folder. So you use this tool, Firebase. That's the command line tool, and you run Firebase init. And this will initialize your project and sync it up with your console project. So it gives you a couple different options of if this is a database project or a hosting project, and this is a hosting project, so we're going to select hosting. And then it gives you an option of your different console projects that you have, and so we just created the Totally Unscripted Live project, so we're going to select that one. And then from here, I'm just going to use pretty much all the default settings. So I'm just going to enter. I'm going to use the public directory, enter. No, we don't want to. There's some other configurations for other needs, and we don't need it. So I just accepted all the default settings. So now you'll see that it's written a couple of new files needed for deployment. So now we just hit Firebase deploy. All right. So it says that all my files have been uploaded. And so now, and it says that we can visit the URL above by hitting Firebase open. So I'll run Firebase open. And we'll go click on deployed site. All right, so this is where it creates a default index for you. But what we're interested in is all of our hosted images, and we put those in the public folder. So the public folder was put basically at the root of the project of this URL that we have, which is tu-live.firebaseapp.com. So for example, we had two cat files, cat.jpg. Hey, there it is. And cat1. Maybe it wasn't cat1, but I know cat was in there. So now,
Was cat2, Spencer?
oh, was it cat2? All right, all right. So there's our wonderful cats. So now we can go to our project, our add-on. This is just a quick little. All this does is just serves up one HTML page called index. This is an app script project here. And for example, here's the source. Let's see, where are we at? Let's take that link right there. We can put that in our source. And now we can look at it, and there's our wonderful cat insider app script project. So it's, as you see, it only takes a couple seconds from creating the project to copying your files over to a local directory, initializing that using the Firebase init tool, and then using Firebase deploy. And from there, all your assets will be hosted. And this is true web hosting. So, for example, if you have a JavaScript library that you host on there, and it uses linking between different files inside that, it'll resolve those links as you would expect.
So something, for example, if you were using Polymer.
Correct. Let's see. I'm going to stop sharing right there. All right. Yeah. For example, if you were going to be, if you want to use Polymer files for your app script project, you can put all those in your public folder, and deploy those. And then so as you utilize them and as you consume them in your project, it will do all the correct linking that you would need that you would expect. And in fact, if you look at my YouTube channel today, I will have a video about how to host Polymer files using Firebase and how to link to them in your app script project.
And just in terms of costs, what quotas do you get on Firebase? And, how much is it going to cost if you get very popular?
It's actually pretty reasonable. It's in fact, I don't know what they are off the top of my head, but I'm sure it's all in the documentation. So that's kind of the example of what you're looking at is you bet.
Hey, Spencer.
Yeah.
Got two questions. So this means that you would have to create a billing account in Google, would you, to be able to use this, even if you're only using it lightly? Is that right?
Yeah, I believe you have to have a billing account established.
Okay. And the second question is, I noticed that you called your project, whatever it was, .firebase.com or something. Does that mean that every project is unique across the whole universe?
Correct. But the other thing is, at the free level, which is now, you have the ability to repoint to it from your own domain. So that used to be a paid tier of where you could brand your hosted files with your own domain. Was at the paid tier, but that's now at the free tier. So you can now point to your Firebase project from your own DNS and to be able to run it under your own domain. So if you were hosting files on Firebase, you can make it show up as mycompany.org when you link to them.
Okay, but when you create that project in the first time, it just so happens that no one had chosen the same names in the whole world as you had done.
I believe so. I think project IDs
Yeah.
work under the same thing as the API console projects, where they have to be unique everywhere.
Okay. Great, thank you.
Any other questions?
So, yeah.
So there's been some discussion around Firebase storage compared to Firebase hosting.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. So file-based storage is for just storage of pictures and content that your users create. If you link to those, if you try to link to those in your project, you won't have the linking ability. So if you have a JavaScript file that links to another JavaScript file in the same directory, it wouldn't link to that. The URLs wouldn't be relative to each other, and so those URLs would break. So it's the Firebase storage is similar to what we can still do with Drive, where we can still host files in Drive and link to them or app script projects for authenticated users, but you won't get the linking of like HTML and JavaScript files if they try to link to each other. Those links would be broken.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Now, so Ivan Cotil did a post a while ago, I think a couple of years ago, on Google storage. Is Google storage different from Firebase storage, or is it just?
I believe so, because Google Storage will do the same thing, where you can actually use Google Storage as a host for a website, and it will maintain relative links to each other. But that does not have a free tier, though. That is a pure paid service. Even though if you're a small time, you just have a couple of one-off scripts, you're only going to be paying pennies a month for that.
Yeah. Actually, I'm using Google Cloud Storage for hosting. So what you do is you set up what's called a storage bucket, which is essentially just like Firebase hosting, as we saw there. And as a matter of fact, Firebase hosting uses Google Cloud Storage behind the scene, as I understand it. But again, you got to sign up for a billing account, and even though you don't use enough to pay, you've still got to give your credit card, etc., to be ready to pay. But at the same time, you can set up things like, I don't want to pay more than $5 a month or whatever, so you can kind of put some controls on it. But nevertheless, in both these solutions, you're going to have to be prepared to pay, even if you end up not actually paying.
Yeah, that's correct. For example, on where I work for a small public school district, and we host lots of small add-ons that we use, that we consume just internally. I've never broken the paid threshold ever for Firebase hosting, and we have, I don't know, we were pretty small. You know, we only have 1,000 daily users that are making several thousand hits a day. So we're pretty small here, but we've never even come close to hitting above the free tier.
Okay, well, that's great. Thanks.
Plenty of options out there. So whilst it's a pain, you've got a whole marketplace of where you can potentially get free hosting elsewhere. Although it was quite nice having it in Drive. And just on that, Bruce, I think there were some discussions on how you could still host images on Google Drive. Is that?
Yeah, there is a. If you use the advanced drive service, you can take a look at one of the properties of a file, and there's something that's called web content link that still allows you to use that to link to the file. It's actually a formulaic. It's just the drive.google.com use CE equals the ID, something like that, and that allows you to still link to a file, but it only works for images. It doesn't work for other things. So in other words, it downloads other things and it serves up images. Okay. So yeah, it is still possible to do, but who knows for how long.
Well, let's see if anyone in the Hangout's got any last quick questions for Spencer. But as Spencer said, he's got a video up later today, Spencer, on hosting things like Polymer and Firebase.
Yep, I'll have that video up on my own personal YouTube channel.
Well, thanks again, Spencer, for another great walkthrough. So we've now got a new face to Totally Unscripted, but not a new face to the community. We've got Steve Webster, who's a top contributor and also a moderator for the Google Add-ons developer community. Hi, Steve. And Steve, you're going to share some of your magic today about some of the flows that you can do to help keep your users informed of new features.
Yes. Hello, everyone. Yeah, so what I want to explain today is, let's say I want to make some money with an add-on, and part of this effort is communication. So let's say you get up to 20, 30, 50 plus thousand users. Well, wouldn't it be nice to let them know whenever there's a new feature with like a pop-up dialog? And when this occurs, we don't want to annoy them by showing this pop-up every time they log in. So let me share my screen. I'll show you what I'm talking about. So I'll be referencing this document, but before I do, let's do a quick demonstration. Let me magnify a little bit here. So if I open up an add-on, and let's say it's a right sidebar, and we want a pop-up to occur. Now let me take care of that. I thought I had it ready. One moment. I'll explain what I'm doing here in just. I'll do a recap. Just hang on. Let's change this to say something different. Okay, this opens up. Okay, so if there's a new announcement I want to make, there's new features, something I want to share, it's possible to do that by leveraging the property service. So we're going to get into how to do that. So again, if I open this up a second time, I do not want to annoy my customers, right? So I just simply want them to open up and not have this recurrence of the pop-up. So how do we communicate like this? Well, I'll be sharing this resource that I have here. It's a little description. And one of the things we want to accomplish is how do we leverage our tools with an app script to do this? Well, one simple way is to leverage the property service. So let me show you a little visual here of what I'm talking about. Now, it's possible to go to the online documentation for Google App Script. And in fact, I've copied and pasted the description of the property service here. And I'll share this drawing as well at the conclusion of our episode. But basically, we have one Google App Script, and then within this Google App Script, we have three methods. There's a script method, user method, and document method. So what we're going to use in this demonstration is the script method and user method. So what we're going to do is with this app script, I'm going to create a key value, and the value could be anything, but let's say we're using a date. So I'll set at the script level a date, and then at the user method, if it's a first-time user, I'm going to assign the value of the script to the user method. So if it's a new user, they'll always get an announcement pop-up. But let's say a couple months later, I have my existing users, and it could be 50,000 of them, and I want to explain to them I've got some new features. So what I'll do, I'll go to the script method, change the key value from like today's date, and then when the user logs in, the script will check the user method for that particular user. If it's not the same as the script, if it's different, then we want to go ahead, throw that announcement up to them. And then we want to set the same value of the script to the user. So if it's the same value, we will not display the pop-up. Okay? So I'll share this with you at the end. I have a couple of notes here. When a script is published with our managed version numbers, these properties are not bound to a version. It's outside of that. And one interesting note, if you're using a library, it's like a separate instance of script properties. And however, since we're talking about add-ons, it's not recommended to leverage add-ons or leverage libraries and add-ons, so I just want to make that note. All right, so let's go in to the code. So when we're creating our app scripts with add-ons, you typically have the server side and the client side. So in this case, on the client JavaScript side, when the add-on is ready, I want to do a check. So I simply call a server function. In this case, I'm calling it new version. So let's go over to the server side. And so here is where I'm comparing the two methods, the script method versus the user method. And right here is where if it's a new user or if the script is a new value compared to the last time the user has opened up the add-on, it will then go ahead and show the dialog. And the dialog is just simply another function here leveraging the HTML service. So in this case, it's called new version. So that is just basically HTML where you can put in whatever you want, any style that you want. And I typically put in a close statement here. And I also like to put an update just as a best practice. Last time it was updated. Now, to update the script method, I could have a function to do that, but it's possible to simply go into File, Project Properties, Script Properties tab, and change it here. So let's say I change it to another date, or as long as it's different from what it was before. Click Save. If I go back to my example, it should now pop up again because the user script is different from the script method. Okay? And this document will have the overview of what we just went over, the examples, the client JavaScript that's needed, server side, and a little diagram to help you to understand that there's a user method per user, but there's only one script per script. And that is it.
Thanks for that, Steve. It's really simple. I think, and that is in a really nice, a good way. That is, once you are aware of, how you can do this, it is so, easy to do, so easy to implement. And I love the fact that within your, changing the script property, you're just looking for a change in something. So, you could easily overcomplicate this with like version numbers, which I suppose you could use and check what version, but the fact that you're just looking for something different, I think, is a really nice bit of coding.
Yeah. Well, I could also add this. Sometimes there's Google service issues, and we want to let the users know urgently to say, hey, we know there's an issue with a Google service. We're monitoring the situation, so that way it's good communication. So when we step back from the coding, it's also this customer relationship that you have, and communication is very key.
So something that's caught me out before is that there is quotas on property service, and I wasn't using these in an add-on context where quotas are slightly different. But have you experienced any issues with hitting property service quota limits?
No. Since we're leveraging the user method, and it's like per user per se, I have, I think, over 55,000 users with remove blank rows, and I've had no issues reported. So.
I think I've just brought up the documentation, and so now they've previously I think it was just write quota, but now they've clarified as write and read of on consumer accounts of 50,000 a day. So I guess you've got to be hitting a lot of property service, but I know property service is such a nice feature within AppScript. I know, Bruce, you've got a couple of examples of how you're using property service for storage. Is quotas something that you hit into with property service?
Not really, because as Steve says, you're talking about often talking about a per user quota, and 50,000. In Steve's case, all these users would need to log in the same day for that to be an issue. Property service does have another 2 quotas, which can be a problem. One is it's rate limited, so it's one of these ones that you can't do too often. Too quickly between each access. And the second is that you're only allowed to have a certain amount of data against a key and in the property store as a whole. So you've got to be kind of a little bit careful as to what you use it for, but in principle it's really useful. I mean, using the same technique that Steve just talked about, you can, quite often you want to measure if a user's been here before. Is this the first time I've seen this guy? And you don't necessarily want to store his email address or any other identifying feature. So what you can do is you can check the properties. You can store something in the user property store for that script, because it is by script, and give the user some unique ID. And if he hasn't got one of them, it means it's the first time you've seen him. And if he has got one of them, then you can increment some count to know that you've seen this guy so many times. And you can also store data against this unique key that you generate in some database somewhere if you even want to. and then that way you can build up an anonymized picture of who's visiting and what they're doing and everything else. So it's quite I use that on a couple of things. It's quite a useful way to go about it. So the user properties and the script properties is a very useful capability, and if you're writing an add-on, I can't see how you wouldn't be using it, because it's really a good thing to do.
I'll just open up to the floor just to see if there are any questions from people with the Hangouts. That feel free to just open your mic and ask away.
Yeah, hi. This is Raul Flores.
Hi there, Rudy.
Hello. Yeah, I would like to add something on the property service. I have a domain restricted add-on, which was my first add-on, and I did run into an issue, but it was when we were stress testing it. So I have the add-on has process steps, and you either go to a step or you view the instructions on the step. When you go to it, each step is associated with one or more sheets, and those sheets are either created or brought back, so you can get back to the work you were doing. So it's using the document properties are being used to know every time you click go which sheets are there, so that it can compare against what's expected. It works fine as the use cases go, but when I started pounding on it, like putting in a lot of extra sheets and just going through the paces of testing it, I did hit the properties limit, and it would say service invoked in too many times, right? Now, if anybody knows how to monitor your usage on the property service, that would be nice. Other than tracking it yourself, right? Because I mean, you can look up the quotas, but you can't necessarily just grab how your usage is going, unless that's in the error object. Maybe it is, but I haven't checked that actually. I probably should. Shame on me on that one. But one of the things I did notice was I was in a class and the instructor mentioned that a lot of times these quotas can be increased for your account if you ask. Now I don't know who he's asking or how you go about that, but he did mention it like it was no big deal. Like the other thing was I had thought about working around it, but I do like the property service for exactly that kind of thing, right? For me it makes sense. Now also that was on a domain, an older grandfathered domain, which has a lower limits than like a Google's App for Work domain. So I'm actually thinking of moving it to an Apps for Work domain or running them both. So where I do my free stuff, in my old domain, and I do paid stuff in a paid Google Apps for domain. So anyway, if that makes sense, that I did run into that, but only in that perspective. Otherwise, it works really well.
I think everyone. Sorry.
Yeah. Did you hit the invoke too many times in one day, or invoked too many times too quickly? Which one of those did you hit?
Excellent question. Invoked too many times too quickly, and of course you just had to wait a little bit and then run it again, and it was fine.
So the too quickly, you should always use exponential backoff for any rate limited service. Just by default, you should always use that. That's a technique for trying it, and if it doesn't work, wait a bit, try again. Because the problem with the solutions that you often read about in the documentation about waiting a second between, sometimes it says wait a second or 10 seconds or whatever before you do the next one. Most of the time, you're wasting that time. So when you think about it, if your script can only run for 6 minutes and you do like 100 things and you wait 10 seconds between each one, then you've used up your entire script execution time waiting and not doing. So it's always better to use exponential backoff. Try and do it. If it fails, wait a tiny amount of time. Try and do it again. If it still fails, wait a bit longer, and eventually you'll get through. So exponential backoff. Maybe we'll make that a topic for one of these sessions, because it's a really excellent technique and helps out a lot of people. And that's the one that people usually hit, and they always think that it's the daily quota that they've hit, but they haven't. They just hit the rate limited one.
Correct. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think as well, the fact that we don't know what how our quotas are doing each day is I'm pretty sure there must be an issue ticket on that, because that one comes up quite a bit.
Does anyone know? I'm sorry. Does anyone know if you were to capture the error object on that event, if that is if that information is stored in there somewhere?
No, you don't have. What you really want is how much of my quota have I used.
Yeah.
You need to be able to do a query that says that. I'm afraid you can't do it. You can do it on email. I think there's an email, how much quota have I got left, but in the general other ones you can't.
Okay.
And it also, I think Roman uses Firebase for storing properties, but even with that, you potentially hit into a URL fetch quota limit. So the it's usual app script woes.
No, actually, URL. You're absolutely right. The problem with URL fetch is that there's so many APIs out there today. I mean, there's so many great ones, and we're all being encouraged to use them and everything else, which is great. But the URL fetch quota limit hasn't increased in all the time. At least I think that's true. I might be wrong, but I think it's true in the past 5 years. So you're trying to use quotas on a service that's very useful nowadays, that maybe much more so than before, and there are so many more Google APIs, etc. But the URL fetch quota hasn't changed for that time. So there is an issue on that, and you should probably just all star it. I'll find it and send you the link later on, because I think this is an important issue for many things, because as Martin said, one way around it, you could use URL fetch, but then that's got its own quota problems coming up.
I was just going to add something. I'm also hoping that since Firebase reminds me of BigQuery, with Google Apps Scripts we have advanced services, BigQuery's in there, so wouldn't it be nice to have Firebase as part of the advanced services family?
And then I might add as well, if you wanted to work around it and build an object at the beginning, the question would be whether you put that object on the client side or the server side, right? And I don't have a lot of experience on that, but I do have, like, every time in my add-on I have analytics that get written, and I create an object in the beginning that's the object run stats, and those run stats get loaded when my work is starting. They get written along the way, depending on what's going on, and then when the go request gets completed, it gets written to a sheet. So I have process-based analytics on how everything went. And my question was, what would be some thoughts about working around the property service, but I kept not going down that road because, well, one, I'm like, how fast could it be? It might be pretty darn fast. Two, it seems a little silly to do it, but if the computer's fast at it, why not? But then three, why am I needing to go around the property service if it's there? So those were my thoughts, thinking out loud about that.
There's also some really interesting emerging web technologies that we can access with AppScript, things like Service Worker, which I had a go at playing with, but with Service Worker you need a JavaScript file installed at the root of the domain for it to work, and we obviously can't do that within. I was trying it with a published web app. We can't do things like that, and Service Worker allows you to do storage. I think, Steve, do you have an example of a script that allows offline and then online, or am I making that up in my head?
I have written a script for a client where you go from online, offline, and back to online. I don't have an example publicly available, but I have done it successfully.
So is that just using content service just to push, so you have a...
I was just using local storage on the client side. Yeah, because it's possible with some odd events to say, oh, I'm back online, and when that fires, then you can access your local storage and sync up your database behind the scenes. So it's a smooth transition for a person. So let's say you write a web app and they're using it on their phone and they go into a basement. They can still work. They'll go to their local storage. They come back out in their parking lot or what have you, and then it wakes up and it starts syncing behind the scenes without touching a button. So that is all possible with a web app.
And could you use temporary local storage for an add-on? Can you invoke it from the sidebar?
I have not tried that. It's a very good question.
You should be able to. There's no problem about using local storage on the under HTML service. So whether it's a sidebar or a web app, it shouldn't make any difference.
Good.
Well, conscious of the time, thank you, Steve and Spencer, for some really interesting demonstrations. I think that solve some really practical issues that we're facing within the AppScript community right now. Just a reminder that this is a community show, so we're looking for volunteers to step forward and show off, share some stuff for our next show, and we'll include a contact details, a suggestion box on the event page, and we'll include that with the show notes as well. And who knows, you might get a T-shirt. Just saying, not guaranteeing.
When am I getting my T-shirt?
I'm not saying, just, who knows. So with that, thank you all for joining, participating, watching, and hopefully you'll be able to join us next time.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.